Welcome to Truth by Billie Beene. Today's date, July 21, 2025. Time in Texas about 2 p.m. I have a subscribe button in the lower right corner of my screen. Thanks for like, subscribe, and share. And for hitting the like button, that helps my channel to grow. Some of the sources I'll use today. U.S. Army.mil, PINBALL, David Nino Rodriguez, Texas Weather Center, Ryan Hall, y'all. Some of the things we'll cover. Heat dome, Alaska, a 6.2, and President Trump versus the deep state. We know he's going after the deep state operatives, Obama, Brenham, Comey, plus Ukraine in a NATO exercise in Georgia. Georgia is a nation that borders Russia. So for Ukraine to be involved in a NATO exercise that's on the border of Russia is somewhat questioning. We have questions about that. Okay, we're going to begin with the U.S. and what's happening with the weather, some updates on earthquakes. We currently have in the Gulf of America a disturbed area that's predicted by Texas Weather Center and Ryan Hall, y'all. No tropical development, but it will come ashore from Texas to Florida and cause heavy rain next week. Now, the big weather operatives will have over most of the U.S. for the next 6 to 10 days is a heat dome that's going to produce temperatures of 100 to 115 feel-like temperatures. I know in Texas we're today it's like 89 degrees, but the real feel is 105. So there's a formula to add temperature and humidity, wind, and so forth for feel-like temperature. So these are very dangerous temperatures. Most of the nation will be feeling for the next 6 to 10 days. This part of the U.S. will have a slight cool down. Now, this heat dome with the moisture coming in from the Gulf is going to have a boundary level that's predicted to produce some heavy thunderstorms in the next few days. So that's going on. And we have this. Yeah. Our real field temperature, 100 to 115. Yeah. So that's going on. Now, we're continuing to see some earthquake activity, Alaska. And then we have right here, this is Russia, Kamchatka. We know recently we had in Alaska a 7.3. We had in the Kamchatka, we had a 7.4. We had them in the ocean and on land. The Kamchatka, Russia area was followed up by at least 4 6.6s, plus many 4s and 5s. Now, within the last 24 hours, we've had a 6.2 in Alaska. So we definitely see something going on along those. We got the Juan de Fuca plate here, the Pacific plate, the Costco's plate, and so on. So we see activity going on here. And we're continuing to see along the Cascadia area swarms of earthquakes and some activity along the San Andreas. So, based on this major activity we're seeing off the West Coast, we shouldn't be surprised if we see more seismic activity possibly affecting the axial seamount, an underwater volcano in this area. Also affecting the U.S. West Coast. Also could affect Japan in this area that we know has been experiencing swarms of earthquakes. So that's going on. And now we have this. Yeah, Stephen Burns, we had a 6.2, July 20, about midnight, so July 2021. And he says that produced a second magnetic pulse. Now, in this area, we have a Earth magnetic pulse reporting station, which this station registered a uptick in magnetic pulse when we had the 7.3, and Stephen Burns said it did the same thing when we had the 6.2 about midnight. So yeah, we see Earth shaking, particularly along our area to affect the West Coast. Now we're going to talk about the Genius Act. PINBALL did a good job of explaining that. So the Genius Act, President Trump quipped, this could have been named after me. So because it talked about stable coin, I mean, I just thought it was something about crypto, but it's not about crypto. The intent of the Genius Act is to stabilize and to increase the stability and the use of the US dollar on a global basis. And it's not a CBDC, and it is another Genius Act by President Trump to break the U.S. away from the Federal Reserve. So the way I understand this, the stable coin will be a global digital avenue that all nations can use and convert their currency to U.S. dollars. So it's somewhat of like the SWIFT system, but it's independent of the SWIFT, and it's somewhat of an alternative for BRICS, because the intent is to engage in international trade using the U.S. dollar. But one of the biggest attributes of this Genius bill is that it's another break by the U.S., the American people and the U.S. government, away from the deep state Fed Reserve. The Fed Reserve will have no input and no control over the virtual digital avenue of the Genius Act that will supply U.S. currency in global trade. So that's good. So we see President Trump moving ahead, make America great again, and break us away from the deep state. So that's going on. And now we'll talk about David Neo Rodriguez brings this out. So President Trump, in another move against the deep state, had the DOJ open criminal investigations into Obama's head of the CIA, Brennan, head of the FBI, Comey, and then President Trump's DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, came out with information in the last few days about the Obama directed operation to make a false claim and produce false evidence for the basis for Russiagate, putting forth that Russia was interfering in U.S. elections to benefit President Trump. And now we're finding out it was all a dim. President Obama and his team manufacturing so-called evidence. So now Tulsi Gabbard is saying that President Trump's team has whistleblowers from Obama's team. Yeah, I bet they do. They want to save their behind. So that's going on. Now we'll talk about what's going on the war system. So we have Russia. Let me get this. We have Belarus, Ukraine. So we have Russia coming down something like this. There's a nation on the border of Russia that's called Georgia. So it's the nation of Georgia. We have on this side Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland. We have Slovakia, Hungary, Romania. There's a small nation that borders Ukraine called Moldova. And a part of Moldova is this small area that's called Transnistria. Okay, we're going to be talking about these things and upcoming NATO. So there's going to be a NATO exercise, Agile Spirit 25, July 23 through about August 7. Supposedly it's involving 2,000 troops plus. So I'll cover, and Ukraine will be involved in this exercise located right on the border with Russia. Wonder how Russia's going to react to that. So we have this. DURAN also brought some information out about Tulsi Gabbard and her bringing out this Russiagate information, and that President Trump is releasing the information, and that more whistleblowers are coming out talking about the meeting at the White House chaired by President Obama. And this Russiagate went on from 2016 to 2019, and that present at the planning meeting at the White House in 2016, President Obama, his Vice President JB, and his cabinet, it's believed Peter Strzok with the FBI might have been there or might have been provided with information. FBI leader McCobb was there. Now, I find this interesting because this happened in 2016 through 2019. It's widely believed by many American citizens that the flesh and blood JB actually passed away in 2019. At any rate, DURAN puts forth more information that's coming out. This is also another blow to the deep state, taking down their money with the Genius Act and so on, and now hitting them in other directions. So overnight in Ukraine, we had Russia hitting the capital city of Ukraine, Kiev, They also hit this area, Kharkiv, and Ivo Frankenest, as is about in this area. Okay, Ukraine. Then, so Russia hit these areas overnight, and Ukraine hit this area, Sumy. They launched a counter-offensive. We also have that Russia is moving across the Dnipro River. Some sources, including deep dives, say they're taking almost 50 miles a day. So that's going on. And now we have this. So we have Ukraine involved in a NATO exercise, and this information came from the Europe, Africa, .us, .mil location. So this is undeniable. The U.S. military is putting this information out. So we have an exercise going on here, Agile Spirit 25 on Georgia, on the southern border of Russia, July 23 to August 7. And it's going to include, so we have Georgia right here, we have Azerbaijan, we have Armenia. Armenia and Japan are not members of NATO, they're going to be observers. The nations that will be sending troops and equipment, planes, trains, planes and tanks and ships, will be include Moldova. Now Moldova is also not a member of NATO. And we have Romania, Bulgaria, the US, Poland, Lithuania, Georgia. Georgia is also not a NATO member. So we see a NATO exercise involving at least 3 non-NATO members: Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. Also included are France, Germany, Slovakia, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Tunisia. So that's going on. Had to search to find that they were sending 2,000 troops. My opinion is, I doubt that that's all the number of troops. I believe I'm just not being able to find the total number of troops. So Europe, Africa.army.mil. So it's not US, it's Army, who's putting forth that there is a joint team made up of Lithuania, Poland, and Ukraine. So we see Ukraine troops right here on the southern border with Russia in the nation of Georgia. Now we have this coming out also. So it's believed that right here, Transnistria, which is culturally Russian-speaking people, Russia since the 1990s has maintained a permanent Russian military base. They have at least 1,500 troops here. Now, it's believed that they're getting ready in August to send 10,000. It's believed, and I've put out in previous videos, that I believe Russia will take Luhansk. There we have Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson. I believe they will take Odessa, which is the port on the Black Sea. I believe they will take Transnistria, which is a part of Moldova. But as I said, this is the history that's going on. Moldova is to have a new election in September. So the government of Moldova is putting out now that in August, it's believed Russia will bring in 10,000 troops inside Transnistria. So that goes along with my thinking that Russia's going to take Odessa and that they would take Transnistria. I believe they will also take the Suwalki Gap. That's right about here. To give them a land corridor between Belarus and their enclave, Kaliningrad. And now we're hearing that NATO also has a plan to take Kaliningrad, it's believed, in August. Won't that be convenient if NATO has a major presence here on this side of the Russian enclave, Kaliningrad, and NATO also has a major presence here in the nation of Georgia. So that's going on. But for sure, there are Ukrainian military troops inside the nation of Georgia, allegedly participating in a NATO exercise of which Ukraine is not a member. So that's going on. So it's good to be in prayer for America, President Trump, the U.S. military, and world peace. I love you, and I'll see you soon.